Raven topples backward onto the ground, while the Duke reprimands Drexler for his actions. The Duke questions Drexler's motives for performing a dangerous move, explaining that he wanted Drexler to showcase Raven's abilities instead. Raven looks up at them and confidently points out a cut on Drexler's cheek as evidence of his victory. The Duke shifts his attention to Drexler and notices the cut. Drexler remembers that Raven had charged in during his attack, resulting in the injury. The Duke expresses his anger at Raven's reckless move, concerned that he could have been seriously hurt. He questions Raven about why he would take such a risk just to win a duel. Raven, getting up from the ground, responds by saying that he didn't get killed and that he won the bet. The Duke wonders if Raven lived so recklessly in his past life, to which Raven confirms and explains that he had no other choice because he lived on the streets. Raven emphasizes that he had to go to great lengths to achieve anything, and winning this bet was no exception. Raven asks the Duke for his opinion on whether he managed to showcase his abilities, to which the Duke responds positively, acknowledging that what Raven did was remarkable and even beyond his own capabilities. The Duke speculates that perhaps his future self saw potential in Raven's audacity and took a chance on him. The Duke assures Raven that he will fulfill his promise and provide him with what he currently needs the most. Raven expresses his gratitude and then falls back onto the ground. When Raven wakes up, he finds himself in his bed with the Duke nearby. Raven asks about his whereabouts, and the Duke explains that Raven recovered faster than expected. The Duke informs Raven that they have much to discuss and invites him to come along. Curious about the passage of time, Raven asks how long it has been since their duel. The Duke informs him that it has been about half a day. Raven then asks if the Duke brought a highly skilled priest to aid in his recovery. Princess Chloe sees them walking in the castle and mentions that she had just healed Raven a little while ago. She wonders if her father has something planned that could potentially harm Raven again. The Duke assures her that he wouldn't harm someone who saved his daughter. Raven questions whether he truly saved her or if it was the other way around. Princess scolds Raven, reminding him that he was brought back from a serious condition and should be aware of that. Raven admits his fault for being too ambitious and apologizes to the princess for causing her worries. Princess kindly pats his head and encourages him to act more like a child. The Duke, noticing their exchange, tells Raven to stay away from his daughter. Raven explains that he was merely surprised when the Duke mentioned that he had saved his daughter because in his past life, they didn't actually meet the Black Magician and defeat her together. The Duke asks if it never happened in the previous life, and Princess asks what they are discussing. The Duke assures her that it's not important and promises to tell her if necessary. He changes the topic to the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony, mentioning that he has prepared everything and hopes she will enjoy it. Princess walks away with a bit of disappointment, saying okay. In the Duke's office, he reminds Raven of the advice he gave him and emphasizes the importance of keeping his arrival from the future a secret. Raven assures him that he has no intention of revealing it, especially to the priests. The Duke explains that the flow of time and space is crucial for destiny and is set by the Creator, and even the avatars who oversee all living things cannot alter it. Disturbing the timeline is like disrespecting the Avatar, which is why their family has kept the existence of the Tempest a secret. The Duke acknowledges that it's understandable for Raven not to know about these things since the books that mention these details have disappeared. He mentions that the information is now found in only one book, which is passed down in ancient families, hence the need to limit who knows about it, like the 10 holy knights of the continent. Raven assures the Duke that he had no plans to abandon those knights and is determined to use his knowledge of future technology to make them stronger. The Duke acknowledges Raven's plan and asks about the skill the future Duke utilized. Raven playfully scolds the Duke, suggesting that he should provide him with what he needs the most before asking for a favor. He teases that perhaps the Duke has gotten too old and forgetful. The Duke playfully punches Raven's head and grabs his ear, telling him to improve his manners. As a result, Raven tumbles backward onto the ground. The Duke fulfills his promise and proceeds to share a special skill with Raven, reserved only for the head of the Valencia family. He asks Raven if he is familiar with a power called gravity, while Raven is dozing off. The Duke taps Raven's head and questions why he's falling asleep before they even begin. Raven requests the Duke to stop hitting him, and the Duke advises him to listen attentively. The Duke explains that his family has a special tradition consisting of 4 main parts: mana control, a sword technique combining offense and defense, attribute acquisition methods from levels 3 and 4, and aura attribute acquisition methods from level 7. Raven excitedly asks if there are 4 more parts to the tradition, suggesting that it may explain why Valencia was doing so well. The Duke confirms Raven's assumption and adds that, since Raven prefers using a blunt weapon, he may not need to learn offensive sword moves. Raven expresses his preference for a strong hammer over a wobbly stick. Raven has been yearning for something for a long time and really wants to learn those special defensive moves, as it would greatly improve his attacking and defending skills. However, the Duke mentions that there is another big secret to Valencia's tradition, which involves learning special abilities in auras. The Duke intends to teach Raven how to obtain these special abilities, surprising Raven and leading him to question if it's not about defense. In another scene, the elves are mourning the death of Irina, considering her as their special sword meant to defeat Elbenheim. They suspect that a child from the Morse family might be responsible and decide to gather information while being cautious not to alert the Empire. The leader of the elves reminds everyone that their primary task is still Karun's mission. Returning to the training session between the Duke and Raven, Raven is exhausted and asks if the attribute acquisition method allows him to choose his desired attribute. The Duke confirms this, but then recalls a decision he made when Raven fell during their practice fight and the Duke had to lift him. The Duke reminds Raven that, even though he's a child, he's heavier than the other knights. The Duke asks Raven if he remembers creating his own special mana body in his previous life. Raven affirms that he does. The Duke asks Raven to reflect on something. In his previous life, didn't the Duke wear heavy armor? Raven recalls that the Duke indeed wore heavy armor. The Duke explains that the heavier a person's body, the slower their movements become. In simple terms, if someone carries a lot of weight, their movements are affected by a natural rule called gravity. The Duke asks Raven if he understands why this happens. Raven asks why, and the Duke elaborates that gravity is a force in the world that makes things fall towards the ground. He mentions that when someone obtains the gravity attribute, they can become faster and stronger based on their weight. The Duke asks Raven for his thoughts and if he's becoming interested. The Duke emphasizes that regular experts who only add attributes cannot come close to this special force. While the Duke was providing further explanations, Raven found himself increasingly drawn to the information. However, Raven expressed their confusion by bluntly asking the Duke, "What on earth are you talking about?" This question caught the Duke off guard, as he realized Raven didn't comprehend his explanation. The Duke insisted that Raven listen attentively as he continued to elaborate, stating that the land masses possess a powerful force that pulls objects downward. In response, Raven sarcastically remarked that the Duke must have consumed something awful to spew such nonsense. Raven further questioned why people weren't sprawled on the ground, kissing it if this force was indeed present. The Duke feigned laughter, realizing that Raven hadn't grasped his intended meaning. The Duke, frustrated, asks why things fall to the ground, and Raven responds that it just happens without overthinking it. This infuriates the Duke, and he pulls Raven's ears while calling him a strange thinker. In pain, Raven calls for help, and the Duke tells him that it won't work, urging him to accompany him. And the scene transitions to Raven hanging from a tower's window while the Duke holds him outside. The Duke suggests that perhaps Raven will only understand if he experiences gravity physically. Raven's special power, mana, starts to freeze, and the Duke asks again why a person falls when they climb to a high place. With a trembling voice, Raven responds, "Gravity." The Duke drops Raven from the top of the tower, instructing him to feel gravity with his body. In a desperate moment, Raven activates his iron body and calls for help from Lunar Wolf, as he believes he's going to die. Lunar appears on the ground just as Raven is about to land. Raven apologizes to the wolf and cushions Raven's fall, causing both of them to tumble to the ground. The Duke arrives and asks Raven if he now understands the power of gravity. Raven replies that he definitely felt it all over his body. The Duke jokingly remarks that dropping Raven from such a height demonstrated the power of gravity, but Raven didn't get hurt. The Duke then asks if Raven can control gravity now. Surprised, Raven asks what the Duke means. The Duke explains that it seems they need to repeat this process a few more times for Raven to learn. Raven asks if the Duke can't just explain it with words instead, but the Duke declines, stating that Raven will learn better by experiencing it physically. The Duke drops Raven from the tower once again. The next thing Raven knows, he wakes up in a bed with Princess Clove sitting nearby. He asks her where he is. The princess is relieved that Raven has awakened and praises him for his incredible progress. She heard that Raven had already become an expert. This news shocks Raven, and he asks if he's already an expert. He remembers the drops he experienced from the tower and wonders if they actually worked. The princess, surprised at Raven's progress, asks what kind of training he's been going through. She mentions that even though she's glad Raven has become the Duke's student, the training seems really tough. Raven wonders how anyone could call that training. The princess continues to praise Raven, saying it's incredible that he's already become an expert. She tells him that people are already talking about a genius showing up in the Blue Wing. Curious, Raven asks if it's right for the princess to be there with him. He adds that she must be busy preparing for her coming-of-age ceremony. The princess reassures him, saying she's not too busy, just practicing some manners and etiquette. Raven encourages her, saying he's sure she'll do great. The princess seems puzzled and asks him what he means. Raven clarifies that he's talking about her coming-of-age ceremony. The princess playfully taps Raven's head and tells him that, of course, she will do well, it's her special day, after all. Then she asks if it's obvious that she's feeling nervous. Raven responds that he thinks people close to her have already noticed. The princess questions this and adds that it's fine if it's Raven who noticed because they're like family now. Raven is surprised and confused. The princess explains that since Raven is learning from her father, they're like a family. She asks Raven to call her Nuna from now on. Raven wonders about this new title, and the princess asks why he's reacting like that. She says he should be happy as she's the daughter of a duke. Confused, the princess asks why he's laughing. The princess says that now that they're like family, Raven needs to keep it a secret. Raven agrees, and the princess tells him that Knight Drexler has been looking for him on the battlefield. Other knights are also present. Drexler and Raven stand face to face. Drexler is wearing armor and holding a shield. He says he heard that Raven has become really good at what he does. Raven, holding his weapon, agrees and asks why Drexler called him there. Raven notices that Drexler brought someone else along with him. Drexler tells Raven not to worry about the other person and then he drops his heavy hammer on the ground. He suggests having a practice fight to make up. Raven asks if they can do it without using any weapons, wondering if it's because of their last battle. Drexler confirms it, saying that he lost his cool during their previous fight and that wasn't very knight-like. Drexler challenges Raven to a match where Raven can attack freely. He challenges Raven to get used to his new strength. Raven smirks and agrees, saying if Drexler insists, he won't say no. Raven jumps forward to attack Drexler. Drexler tries to protect himself by using his shield, but the force of Raven's attack is too strong. Drexler is surprised, thinking if this is the same kid he met last week. Raven pushes Drexler back with a really strong force. Then Raven grabs his weapon. Drexler knows that even a small hit from Raven's weapon can hurt a lot, so Drexler tries to block Raven's weapon using his fist, but both of them get pushed back by a strong force. Drexler looks at his burned hand and wonders why it felt so hard and heavy. Raven keeps attacking Drexler, and Drexler tries to protect himself with a shield. Drexler is puzzled, thinking that Raven suddenly became faster. Other knights who are watching talk about Raven's weapon. They notice that Raven's mace looks quite heavy, and they wonder how a child can swing it so quickly. Drexler holds onto his shield tightly and realizes that maybe he doesn't need to hold back when facing Raven. Raven tells Drexler that he didn't want that to happen either. Drexler tries to attack Raven and warns that Raven should be ready. Raven defends himself and realizes he's getting the hang of Valencia's techniques. He notices that his swings feel lighter but hit harder when they land. Raven swings his weapon and goes on the offensive, but Drexler blocks his attack with a shield and sends Raven flying back with a strong force. Raven decides to utilize a battle technique known as Lightning Wallop. This technique involves a powerful strike that generates a massive explosion, surprising the other knights who are watching. They wonder if this display of power is the mark of an expert. The impact causes the ground to crack, and Drexler falls down. Drexler admits that he doesn't need to train Raven anymore, and Raven thanks him for his guidance. Drexler asks if Raven knows that he was going easy on him. Raven responds that there is still more to show, reminding Drexler that they are a spirit tamer. Drexler gets up, laughs, and tells Raven that they have passed the test. Drexler welcomes Raven to the Blue Wing. However, Raven tells Drexler that they don't plan to join the Knight's Order. Raven asks if Drexler didn't hear about this from the Duke. This shocks Drexler, and he asks Raven why they are making this decision. Raven tells Drexler that they don't plan on joining the Knights group. Drexler is surprised and asks Raven why they learned the special technique of the Valencia family. Later, in the Duke's office, Raven is informed by the Duke that they forgot to mention something to them. The Duke thinks it's better for Raven not to be tied down to one place if they plan to travel the world. The Duke praises Raven for doing a great job and admits that Raven exceeded their expectations. Remembering all the times the Duke dropped them from the tower, Raven sincerely thanks the Duke. The Duke lets Raven know that they are almost done getting ready for the first big challenge. Raven asks if they're missing anything else, and upon noticing the word, almost, the Duke tells them that they're going to make an artifact warhammer for Raven. Artifacts are special weapons with long-lasting magic that can be very valuable and expensive, even costing a few years' worth of a knight's salary. Raven tries to decline, saying it might take a long time to make it. The Duke shares that they've been working on something for a few months. This surprises Raven, and they ask how the Duke knew they would need it. The Duke says it's a secret but reveals that it was originally meant to be a gift for Drexler, who has been working with them for a long time. Inside the best smithy in Valencia, called Rendell's Hammer, there's a skilled dwarf craftsman named Rendell. Rendell turned to Raven and sought confirmation, asking if he had heard correctly, that Rendell should indeed consider modifying the weapon to better suit someone of Raven's age and size. Rendell becomes very upset and says they'd rather cancel the deal and pay the penalty. They can't believe Raven is treating their craftsmanship like a child's toy. Raven remembers hearing that the dwarf craftsman aims to make a weapon that perfectly matches its owner, even if it means some loss. Raven realizes that Rendell is similar to Heinen. Feeling confident, Raven decides they need to prove themselves. They tell Rendell that they are even better than a knight of the super rare class. Rendell can't believe that Raven is an expert at such a young age. They think Raven might be using some kind of trick, so they use their special ability called Eyes of Judgment. This ability helps them figure out if someone is telling the truth by sensing their emotions through their words. The Duke realizes the truth and decides to let Raven see something. The dwarf asks Raven to wait for a moment and then shows them a hammer. Raven wonders if it's almost finished, and the dwarf explains that it still needs some adjustments. Raven notices that the hammer has a feature that restores itself automatically and another one that makes hits stronger. The dwarf mentions that they also need to work on its defense magic. Raven asks about offensive magic, and the dwarf points out that they seem more interested in defense. Raven clarifies that it's not like that, and the dwarf explains that not many artifacts have multiple magical functions like this warhammer. They say that only someone foolish would turn down an artifact with 3 magical abilities. The dwarf reveals that they actually have one more artifact warhammer available. It's just a heavy lump of squashed black iron with some special markings carved on it. The dwarf says that even the person who is supposed to wield it gave up on it. Raven gets really excited and says they like it. They ask about its other features, and the dwarf explains that it has the ability to make hits stronger and to fix itself automatically. Raven is eager to see it in action, and the dwarf demonstrates. Raven is thrilled, and the dwarf suggests that if they really want it, they should try lifting it. But it's really heavy, over 100 kilograms. Excitedly, Raven manages to lift it but then accidentally drops it. The dwarf gets worried and shouts that Raven might break the place. Raven hugs the hammer and calls it cool. The dwarf wonders if Raven is strange. Raven realizes that even though it's a bit different from their previous life's weapon, Nocturne, the warhammer called Stamp has some similarities. Raven asks if the handle can be adjusted to accommodate their growth in the future. The dwarf asks for payment, and Raven smirks, suggesting they ask the Duke for double payment. Finally, Raven asks about the name of the hammer, and the dwarf reveals that it is called Stamp. Raven shares this information with the Duke, who approves of the name and believes that Drexler will also like it. Raven informs the Duke that it will take the dwarf approximately 2 weeks to prepare the hammer. During that time, Raven decides to train and uses a saying from a different language to express that he can't even imagine becoming a superhuman Duke. Curious, Raven asks the Duke about the meaning of the saying. Raven mentions his interest in using expressions from Eastern languages as a hobby, and some people have even wondered if he belongs to a group called the Demon. The Duke finds Raven's humor amusing and praises his choice. The Duke advises Raven to continue using those expressions as it might help him hide the fact that he is not very intelligent. The Duke then contemplates the 2 weeks it will take to prepare the hammer and realizes that Raven will probably leave after Princess Chloe's coming-of-age ceremony. Raven asks the Duke if they will discuss what happened during the ceremony. The Duke asks if Raven is referring to the relationship with the Imperial family, specifically the engagement with the Crown Prince. Despite knowing that the Crown Prince will die on the wedding day, the Duke intends to proceed with the engagement next summer. He shares that all the members of the royal family of Arsalan will die, leading to the decline of the empire known as the Second Catastrophe. The princess will be left with the unfortunate title of the Queen of Misfortune as a widow. The Duke reassures Raven that he is aware of this and can prevent it from happening. However, Raven reveals that even the 2 princes suspected of causing the catastrophe will also die. He adds that they couldn't figure it out in their past life either. Raven acknowledges that they don't have reliable information to go on. The Duke mentions that his daughter Chloe is intelligent and her abilities shine more than her looks, although the world is not yet aware of this. Raven predicts that eventually, the world will come to realize Chloe's capabilities. He suggests that Chloe will seek the Duke's assistance but ultimately solve the Empire's problems herself, even if she doesn't appear happy about it. The Duke expresses his determination to do what is best for his daughter and the world, vowing to prevent the bad events from occurring. Raven agrees not to interfere but promises to save Chloe in his own way if something goes wrong. The Duke playfully punches Raven's head, showing his protectiveness towards his daughter. Raven clarifies that he didn't mean any disrespect and asks why there are so many people around today. The Duke explains that there are only a few days left until Chloe's coming-of-age ceremony, and they are close to achieving their goal. They have worked hard thus far and are confident that everything will go smoothly. Janice Freewell, the Grand Master of the Blue Wing Knights Order, observes the group of visitors entering the castle from the Duke's office window. Janice notes that there are more young guests than expected for the special occasion, which he attributes to Valencia's good reputation. Janice promises to put in the effort to make the celebration a success. The Duke commented that the upcoming task would require a lot of effort. Janice added that in addition, the Rocher family had sent an envoy, specifically their 3rd son, who is known to be unpleasant. The Duke considers the Rocher Dukes to be one of the influential families in the Empire and competitors to the Valentia family. He expressed his surprise at the choice of sending someone like him to such an important event and instructed Janice to warn the envoy that he was in Valentia, not Rocher. Janice responded that they had actually made preparations for him in advance. The Duke questioned the truth of this and commended Janice for being a reliable person. Suddenly, the Duke's smile vanished, and he called Janice, who promptly turned to him. The Duke asked if Janice had some undisclosed illness. Confused, Janice inquired about what the Duke meant. The Duke was serious for a moment but then dismissed it as nothing. Changing the topic, the Duke mentioned that Janice didn't have to get overly concerned about Chloe's ceremony. However, Janice mentioned that Chloe was like a niece to him. The Duke informed Janice that she had also listened to him in the past and had considered him as one of her brothers. Abruptly, the Duke shifted the subject and asked if Janice had no intention of getting married. Taken aback, Janice remained silent for a moment and firmly stated that it would never happen. He reminded the Duke of his promise not to bring it up again, to which the Duke apologized and acknowledged his understanding. Janice commented that the Duke was behaving strangely today. The Duke attributed it to feeling uneasy because of his daughter's upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. He instructed Janice to leave him alone as he appeared occupied, and the Duke was left alone in his room. He clenched his hands and pondered about Janice's free will, considering that Janice had taken over his father's position after the old man's passing. The Duke recalled a conversation he had with Raven, where he asked if Raven was certain that he didn't know Janice in his previous life. Raven confirmed that he had never heard of him, but he was surprised when the Duke mentioned that Janice was already a Challenger class knight. Raven stated that if that were the case, there was no way he could be unaware of him. Returning to reality, the Duke considered the possibility that Janice might not be by his side in the future. However, he realized that neither did he have any illness nor was he planning to retire because he wanted to get married. Alone in his room, the Duke contemplated that it would be unlikely for someone like Janice, a 6th-stage mana user, to die easily in an ordinary battle. Then, the Duke's thoughts shifted to the Second Catastrophe, and he concluded that it must be due to that. Raven slams his weapon on the ground and thinks about Janice. He realizes that what the Sword Emperor had guessed makes sense, and it's likely that Janice might not survive Chloe's wedding day. Princess Chloe arrives, accompanied by Vivian. Raven asks if it's proper for her to be there and wonders if it goes against etiquette for her to talk to him this way. Vivian explains that she tried to stop the princess, but she felt frustrated being stuck in a room. The princess tells Raven that she enjoys hearing interesting stories when she's with him and likes seeing his lunar wolf. Raven asks if she wants to borrow Lunar, and the princess wonders if she can. They contemplate whether Lunar is already used to her. Then a man named Tyborn von Roche arrives and compliments the princess, claiming she is the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. He introduces himself as a member of the Roche family, a prestigious rival of the Valencia family. The princess becomes scared and asks if he said Roche. Tyborn confirms that he is indeed from the Roche family. The princess politely greets him. Tyborn suggests having a conversation to mark their first meeting and mentions that he brought some excellent drinks from his land. Raven doesn't like Tyborn and becomes curious about who he is. Vivian steps up to protect the princess and tells Tyborn to step back, explaining that the princess cannot meet any visitors until the special event is over. Tyborn notices Vivian and realizes she is a knight. He wonders how a woman dares to get involved while he is talking. He calls his guard, Graham, to handle the situation. Graham tells Vivian to step away, stating that this is a conversation between noble families' children. Vivian argues that the situation is absurd and shouldn't be happening. Graham insists that his master, Tyborn, is sincere and has held onto his feelings for years. He wants the princess to understand. Tyborn agrees with Graham and asks the princess for a chance. Raven notices that Graham seems more suspicious than Tyborn and decides it's a good time to repay the kindness they showed him. Raven refers to the princess as Big Sister and questions the two strange men. Tyborn notices Raven's black hair and questions who this kid is. He orders Graham to get rid of Raven. In response, Raven punches Tyborn in the face, sending him flying through the air. Raven tells Tyborn that he is quite skilled at getting rid of trash. Graham, angered by the situation, attacks Raven, but Raven punches him as well, sending him flying. Two men observe the scene from their window and wonder who the kid is that knocked out a knight with just one hit. They question Raven's identity and speculate that he might be a genius or a legendary monster. One of the men expresses interest in meeting the kid and mentions that Duke Valencia is raising such a powerful creature. The other man wonders if Duke Valencia and the Roche family are truly planning to become enemies of the Imperial family. The first man agrees, saying that even Calendon wouldn't want that and suggests that they probably wanted to prevent Valencia from forming a connection with the Imperial family. The first man expresses his disapproval of the underhanded strategy employed by the Roche family, stating that he doesn't believe Roger, presumably a member of the Roche family, can handle Duke Valencia, who has honed his skills in using his aura over many years. He believes that the king doesn't want the Valencia family to act independently and suggests that they should deal with Tyborn and Graham, presumably members of the Roche family, first. However, the second man disagrees and argues that there's no need for them to reveal themselves because the young masters from Valencia genuinely care for their younger sibling, presumably the princess, and are now back. The conversation shifts to Raven, who is in the office of the Duke, explaining the whole story to him. The Duke informs Raven that Tyborn has been kicked out by Rockshire due to his behavior, implying that using violence against Tyborn wouldn't be a problem. Raven sees this as a positive development, but the Duke becomes very angry, slamming the table and standing up, questioning Raven's thoughtlessness and warning him about the consequences of his actions. The Duke asks Raven if he wants to go to jail even before the Demon King army arrives, to which Raven responds negatively, explaining that Tyborn and Graham appeared suspicious. The Duke sits back in his chair, agreeing with Raven's observation. Raven asks if the Duke agrees with him, further infuriating the Duke, who asserts that Tyborn deserves to be punished severely for his behavior and sternly instructs him to stay away from the Duke. Raven leaves the Duke's office, reflecting on his own recklessness, and notices two boys running towards the office in a wild manner. Although Raven feels like he has seen them before, he struggles to recall where. As Raven tries to remember, one of the boys accidentally collides with him and falls down. Raven recognizes the boy as Tren, but he can't remember the other boy. The second boy looks at Raven in surprise because he witnessed Raven push Tren back, despite being a kid himself. The boy, named Aaron, observes the energy emanating from Raven and asks if he is Raven, the kid who fought Drexler. Raven humbly explains that they did have a fight, but Drexler wasn't giving his best effort, didn't use any special weapons. Eren realizes that the rumors they heard about Raven were true. Tren acknowledges that he now understands why his father taught Raven a secret technique. Eren mentions that they are in a hurry, and tells Raven they will see him again before rushing off to confront Tyborn and ensure he doesn't escape Valencia. Raven suddenly realizes that one of the boys is Eren, who is destined to inherit the leadership of Valencia, which explains why he looked familiar. Raven wonders about the identity of the other boy since he only saw one young master in the future. Raven begins to contemplate whether he might meet the same fate as Janice, who dies. Raven believes that the royal family of Arslan is doomed, as the nobles highly value the bloodline of Arslan, which limits the number of guests at the Valencia event. Sarcastically, Raven dismisses the notion of the precious bloodline of the Golden Dragon. Two men who witnessed Raven's defeat of Tyborn and Graham approach him. They advise him to be more cautious with his words, and Raven asks for their identities. Raven observed that the man was wearing a false face, concealed by a magical disguise. Additionally, the man had forgotten to introduce himself. They introduced themselves as Baron Redley von Narsa and another unnamed man. Baron explains that he came as a guest to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony and wanted to meet Raven after hearing the rumors about his fight. Baron asks if Raven serves Lord Valencia, and Raven clarifies that he is staying with them temporarily. Baron expressed his belief that the Duke of Valencia seemed to have poor judgment when it came to assessing people. Raven found this statement to be impolite and pointed out that they were currently in Valencia. He asked Baron if he thought it was inappropriate to speak about the Duke in such a manner. Baron was taken aback by Raven's response. Baron laughs and suggests that since they have given each other advice, they are like friends now. He proposes treating Raven to a meal to celebrate their friendship. Raven contemplates whether he should learn more about Baron by fighting him but decides to heed the Duke's advice to be cautious. Baron mentions that he heard Raven is close to a lady and asks if he can meet her. Before Baron can finish his sentence, Raven slaps him hard, sending him flying through the air. Raven realizes that he is going to get scolded for his actions. The other man, who was with Baron, strikes Raven with his weapon, threatening to rip him apart. Raven demands to know the man's identity and notices that he is manipulating space with mana, indicating his formidable skill. The man taunts Raven, saying he will cut off his rude hand first. Raven realizes that his strong iron armor may not be sufficient to protect him against this skilled opponent. Raven summons his lunar wolf, and the man notices that the wolf is made of mana, deducing that Raven is a spirit summoner. The man briefly lowers his guard, allowing Raven to quickly punch him in the face with force, but the man remains unfazed, not budging an inch. The man seizes Raven by the front of his shirt, propelling him through the air. Raven lands forcefully on the ground, while the man readies his weapon for another attack. However, before he can strike again, Lunar steps in between them and absorbs the blow, falling to the side. Undeterred, the man raises his sword once more, declaring that it's all over for Raven. At that moment, Baron rushes forward and urges the man to stop, taking responsibility for the incident. In the office, Janice informs Raven that he had been eager to meet him, though he didn't expect their encounter to unfold in such a manner. Raven apologizes, and Janice acknowledges that the situation did seem peculiar. However, since Baron plans to forgive Raven, they decide to let the matter go this time. Janice advises Raven to remember an important lesson: Valencia is not a place for frivolity, and if someone is in disguise, it's because they have been permitted to be. Raven assures Janice that he understands. Janice expresses high expectations for Raven, stating that if he takes a moment to think before acting, he has the potential to become a remarkable individual. Raven realizes that this advice aligns with what the Duke had told him. Janice then mentions being busy and requests that Raven excuse him. Raven seizes the opportunity to ask Janice about the man named Landry, whom he just fought with. Raven is curious about Landry's identity and whether he is connected to the Imperial family. Janice realizes that he may have made a mistake and explains that it's unusual to encounter a skilled knight like Landry. Janice asks Raven not to share this information with others, to which Raven agrees, already having knowledge about the engagement. Raven surmises that Landry is likely an investigator from the Imperial family, as the upcoming coming-of-age event is when the prince's engagement is typically announced. A week after the coming-of-age ceremony, Janice made a decision to ensure that this day would be the most splendid for his younger sister, Chloe. However, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Raven, who was voraciously indulging in the food at the event. Raven inquired about the name of a particular dish, which irritated Janus and prompted him to urge Raven to exhibit some self-control. Janus kindly suggests that Raven eat slowly since there is an abundance of food. Raven, with his mouth full, insists that he is already eating slowly. Janus quietly murmurs a warning for Raven to stop eating before he injures his jaw, prompting Raven to inquire about Janus's comment. Janus quickly dismisses it, and he realizes that Raven, at his age, should be eating more, acknowledging that he should be more understanding. Baron enters the scene and requests a private conversation with Raven instead of Janus. Baron apologizes for their previous encounter and expresses admiration for Raven's decision-making. He assures Raven that if he messes up again, Raven should not hesitate to strike him once more. Baron acknowledges that there is no one else who would do such a thing for him. Raven begins to wonder if there is something amiss with Baron's behavior. The announcer announces the arrival of the main figure of the day, Chloe von Valencia, along with her family. Baron blushes upon seeing Chloe, commenting on her beauty. This irks Raven, causing him to contemplate whether he should let this incident slide or not. In the hall, everyone is captivated by Chloe's presence, and they marvel at her, questioning if she is truly real. Some even compare her to an angel from Valencia. Meanwhile, Chloe contemplates that if she successfully navigates through this day, things might change. Raven recalls the time when Chloe asked him to refer to her as his older sister from that point forward. He wishes for Chloe's happiness and summons his lunar wolf spirit, which approaches Chloe and affectionately nuzzles her. Chloe sits on her throne with the wolf in her lap. The Duke, surprised by the wolf's presence, questions why there is a dog there, initially thinking it might be part of a circus act. However, the wolf grows into its majestic form and takes its place beside Chloe's throne. People realize it's a spirit, and someone mentions that it looks like an angel with a mythical creature. Baron, impressed by the spectacle, thanks Raven for the incredible display. Raven becomes suspicious of Baron's behavior and silently promises himself that if Baron acts strangely again, he will slap him once more. The Duke steps forward and expresses gratitude for Chloe's well-being and growth. He also expresses a wish for Chloe's late mother to be present for this special moment. Emotions run high among those in attendance, with some shedding tears. The Duke then places a medal around Chloe's neck, marking the commencement of the main part of the ceremony. He announces that he will now introduce Chloe's future husband, conjuring a magical image of a man who identifies himself as Bradley Van Oslan. Bradley expresses his appreciation for having Chloe, the Angel of Valencia, as his fiancée. He apologizes for not being physically present. The Median is shocked and wonders if this is real. The projection of the Crown Prince is Raven. Raven wonders why Vivian is reacting like that, considering that Bradley is just a prince and his previous life ended without much significance. Baron Narsa says it's finally Raven's turn. Raven grabs Baron's hand and asks where he's going. Raven tells Baron that he doesn't think Baron should join in. Baron pats Raven's head and kindly says he understands that Raven is concerned about Chloe, but Raven doesn't need to act this way towards Baron. Baron Narsa tells Raven to read his name Narsa backward, and it becomes Aslan El, with the R sound similar in Korean. Baron transforms into Crown Prince. Bradley Van Oslan tells Raven that they'll meet again and walks away. Raven suddenly realizes it's the actual Crown Prince, and he panics as he slaps the Crown Prince. Raven worries if he's in big trouble now and wonders if he should let Bradley die during the wedding. Janus interrupts Raven's thoughts by asking what he's thinking. Raven makes an excuse, saying it's a bit hot. Janus assures him not to worry because Bradley has already forgiven him, and even if he hadn't, Raven is protected within Valencia's boundaries. Bradley goes onto the stage and respectfully takes Chloe's hand. Raven realizes that the one who defied the Emperor's wishes for a marriage alliance with Roger and strongly pushed for this engagement is the Crown Prince himself. Janus tells Raven that the Duke has a message for him, saying everything is ready, and after the ceremony, Raven should go see the Duke later at night. Raven goes to the Duke's office, and the Duke thanks him for the impressive spirit show, mentioning that it seemed to calm Chloe's anxiety. Raven replies politely and asks if everything is prepared. The Duke confirms that it is and admits that he still finds it hard to believe that the sacred item called humanitas from Coronable has vanished. The Duke explains that the city Ortis is going to be attacked, not just by any normal monster, but by a giant sea creature known as a kraken. Raven suggests they should investigate further and checks the stamp paper, asking about it. The Duke assures him that the stamp is taken care of. Lastly, the Duke instructs Raven to visit the smithy the next day. At the smithy, the dwarf tells Raven that he's made all the magic waves in the weapon just the way Raven wanted. He's adjusted it for weight amplification, shock amplification, and auto-repairing. Raven picks up the hammer, and the dwarf comments that the hammer has very strange features, and he's not sure what his son was trying to create. Raven holds the hammer up, looks at it, and says he finds it really useful. The dwarf then asks Raven to give the hammer a swing. Raven tries it and notices that it's very well balanced in terms of weight. While riding on Lunar, Raven goes through the woods, holding the hammer. He finds that it works perfectly, even better than he expected. Raven decides he should express his gratitude to the dwarf. Suddenly notices something in the sky and starts running faster. Raven wonders if it's because they're out in the moonlight. He realizes that Lunar is also in excellent condition, which is good because they'll reach their destination in a week. He tells Lunar that they should head to the port city of Anxon. Meanwhile, an elf reports to their leader that Raven has left the Duke's place, riding a strong spirit animal and moving way faster. In a carriage, the elf leader asks where Raven is going. The elf messenger informs that Raven is heading to the nearest port city that goes to Karun and Anxon. This news surprises all the elves there. The elf leader says this is a problem and they should take advantage of this chance to get rid of Raven. The leader orders handlers to be sent out. Raven notices these people and wonders who they are. The men tell Raven that it seems he doesn't realize the danger he's in. They heard that Raven is an expert who's acting arrogant, thinking he can handle 5 people of his level with just 1 spirit animal. Their leader says this is why kids need to be taught a lesson through a beating. So, these men tell Raven to let them, the Black Knights, teach him a lesson. They come towards Raven, trying to hurt him, but Raven easily avoids their attacks. The knights are surprised that the young kid could dodge a hit from someone at his level. One of the knights tells the others not to be scared and thinks Raven must have used some trick. He informs them that they are more than Raven. Raven talks back, saying all they do is talk nonsense. To teach them a lesson, he swings his hammer and says he's going to fight them with a strong hit. Raven knocks down one of the Black Knights and makes fun of them, saying they're not tough enough and compares them to insignificant bugs and devil worshippers. The Black Knights, realizing they are outmatched, try to flee, but Raven gives chase. Riding on Lunar, he confronts them, making it clear that they won't escape his wrath. As he dismounts from Lunar and raises his hammer, he declares that the Black Knights will meet their demise. With a forceful strike, he brings all the knights down, rendering them helpless on the ground. As the ground beneath him cracks, Raven stands tall and gazes ahead at the fallen knights. He is impressed, finding the scene just as amazing as he had imagined. Looking at his hammer, he believes he can continue using it until he grows older. Raven jumps back onto his lunar wolf and walks past the defeated Black Knights. He wonders how these knights knew he would be there and realizes he should have left at least one of them behind. However, his attention is drawn to something behind a tree, and he wonders what it could be. Suddenly, a massive twin-headed troll emerges from behind the tree, letting out a loud roar. Raven feels scared and wonders why such a rare and powerful monster is present. He realizes that compared to the creature, he appears extremely small. In this world, monsters are ranked based on their strength, and a rank 5 monster is considered extremely tough to defeat, requiring a powerful wizard or a rare mana user. Raven is confused about why a rank 5 monster is in this location. The monster tries to attack Raven while he is riding his lunar wolf, but he manages to escape. An elf standing next to the monster commands it to kill Raven, calling him a troublemaker who has bothered their group. The elf angrily orders the monster to crush Raven completely. Realizing that the powerful rank 5 monster was brought there by the monster trainer, Raven instructs his lunar wolf to go after the monster. However, the elf refuses to allow it. The troll crossed its arms, flexing its muscles, and let out a piercing scream. Gripping its axe with both hands, it launched an attack, swinging its weapon with a powerful black and red aura, cleaving through all the surrounding trees. Raven swiftly evaded the strike by swiftly dropping to the ground. The force of the attack was enough to send the uprooted trees flying, creating chaos on the battlefield. Raven realized that the troll had gone into a berserk state. Suddenly, the monster appeared behind him, attempting to execute an overhead slash with its axe. However, Raven swiftly evaded the attack and found the monster to be both annoying and possessing traits typical of a rank 5 monster, such as great regeneration and strength. Raven was aware that there was a limit to the troll's berserk state. As the monster swung its weapon at him again, he knew he needed to wait for the right timing. The troll sniffed the air, seemingly gathering energy, and released a fire-like poison towards Raven. Using his mana to shield his body, Raven stumbled and fell to the ground. The troll launched another attack, with only a small gap remaining before its weapon would reach him. Refusing to give up, Raven attempted to swing his warhammer, infusing it with mana. Realizing he couldn't dodge the troll's attack in time, he retaliated by striking the monster. The force sent the troll tumbling backward and crashing to the ground. Raven jumped toward the monster, smashing its legs with his hammer, causing it to scream in pain. Landing on a tree branch, Raven smirked and mentioned that it was time for weight and shock amplification, knowing it would be painful. Enraged, the monster faced him, seemingly seeking revenge, while its legs began regenerating due to its trait. Raven was shocked by the speed of the regeneration. The troll launched another attack, forcing Raven to leave his position and jump to another tree. From there, Raven leapt towards the monster, dealing another blow. In the distance, an elf observed the fight between Raven and the troll. In his mind, the elf taunted Raven, calling him an idiot and questioning how long he thought he could keep evading, warning that he would be finished if caught even once. As the monster continued its consecutive attacks, Raven kept jumping and dashing to avoid them. Suddenly, Raven found himself at a dead end, leaning against a rock and contemplating where to go next, while the enraged troll still held its weapon, emanating an aura. In the next moment, the berserk trait of the troll exceeded its time limit, causing the monster to become confused. The elf was taken aback, realizing that the berserk mode had already ended. Raven smiled, realizing that it had reached its limit, and stated that it was expected since the troll had regenerated multiple times. Hearing Raven's words, the elf was shocked, realizing that Raven had planned all of this. Suddenly, Lunar Wolf appeared and bit the man in his shoulder, pinning him to the ground. Raven praised Lunar Wolf for its good job. Raven then rushed towards the troll, commanding Lunar Wolf to hold the man still. Shouting, Raven jumped high to attack the troll, using his lightning wallop technique to cut the monster in two with powerful lightning, ultimately killing it. As the dust and smoke cleared, Raven held the two heads of the troll. In the next moment, he approached the man with the hood and demanded that he reveal what he knew. With no choice, the man divulged all his knowledge to Raven, who learned that the organization's headquarters was in the lawless city of the City Federation, with the mayor serving as their boss. The man confirmed this. Raven stated that it meant the two groups were not the same, which confused the man. Raven remembered the cursed chain on Wolf and speculated that they would have placed a curse on the beast trainer who controlled a rank 5 monster as well. The man remained confused. Raven asked if their plan involved stealing Karun's holy object, but the man adamantly denied it. However, Raven insisted that the man had guessed correctly and demanded the name of their leader, promising to spare his life. Raven allowed the man to contemplate his response. The scene shifted to the port city of Anxon, where he walked through the streets whistling. Outside the city, an explosion materialized, causing the citizens to wonder about its origin. Someone speculated that it might be fireworks, unaware that it was the man with the hood who had controlled the rank 5 monster earlier. Raven recalled his conversation with the Duke, who had mentioned that everything was ready and they were waiting for him at the pub in Anxon. Upon arriving at the pub, Raven questioned if it was the right place. As he entered, he was shocked to see the Sword Emperor and wondered if he was truly the reinforcement. However, the Duke placed his hand over his face, and in the next moment, the Sword Emperor transformed into the man with red hair, the owner of the pub. The man commented that their business didn't involve selling alcohol to little kids. Raven infused his eyes with mana, feeling puzzled by the man's changing face. The Sword Emperor touches his face, transforming into the pub's manager. He apologizes to Raven, saying they don't serve alcohol to kids. When Raven gazes closely at the manager, he is taken aback by the absence of any magical aura around him. Raven begins to question if he is imagining things. The customers in the pub mock Raven, particularly targeting his black hair. One customer warns the manager that they might lose customers due to this situation. Suddenly, Lunar the Wolf lets out a fierce roar, causing the customers to scream and seek cover. Lunar stands beside Raven, who expresses his determination not to let the issue go unnoticed. The manager realizes that Raven is a black-haired spirit tamer and deduces that he must be the one who ordered a special menu. The manager apologizes for not recognizing Raven earlier and invites him to come along. Raven hands the manager the silver plaque given by the Duke. After examining it, the manager realizes it belongs to Valencia's secret group, Black Wing. The manager introduces himself as Jay, the leader of Black Wing. Raven concludes that Jay is currently in charge. Raven acknowledges Jay's leadership skills as a swordsman, but he doesn't sense any mana from him and wonders how Jay conceals it. Jay reveals that he doesn't possess any mana and demonstrates by changing his appearance into that of the Sword Emperor. He explains that hiding mana can make disguises more challenging. This revelation leaves Raven astonished, questioning if everything was just a disguise. Jay transforms back into himself and confirms Raven's suspicion. Raven realizes that he wasn't imagining things earlier and asks if it's not too risky. Jay responds that it adds an element of excitement. Raven remarks on Jay's unique preferences, to which Jay suggests focusing on the important issue at hand. They discuss the disappearance of Gale Anderson, a powerful mage known as the Sea Wave Mage. Jay explains that they lost contact with Gale during his exploration of the sea, and it has been 2 weeks past his expected return date. Raven realizes that recommending Gale might be difficult now. Jay mentions they have a backup plan and shows Raven a new identity, asking him to familiarize himself with it. Raven accepts the badge and realizes that the Sword Emperor had arranged for the backup plan. Raven then asks Jay to investigate someone named Hustle, a devil worshipper responsible for trouble in Karun. Jay is shocked by this revelation, and Raven confidently affirms the accuracy of the information obtained through explosive means. Jay contemplates that Hustle sounds like a name that might belong to an orc or beast tribe and states that he will remember it. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and someone informs Jay that they have arrived, prompting Jay to leave swiftly as the big fish has arrived. Raven wonders who the newcomers are, and Jay explains that he has to attend to a large group of customers. Raven realizes that the term big fish refers to a significant number of guests. A few waiters express their admiration for their boss, who has managed to run everything so smoothly. Raven marvels at the success of the pub, which serves as a cover. After spending 2 days on the ship Flaxen, a person announces that the ship will be departing shortly. Wearing a hooded cloak, Raven asks if this is the ship heading to Karun. The announcer notices that Raven is a young child and requests to see his badge. As the announcer realizes that Raven is a noble, he expresses surprise and wonders why a noble child would be unaccompanied by a guard. Raven explains that he is no longer a noble, and the announcer apologizes for his previous rudeness. The announcer wishes Raven a pleasant journey and mentions a noble family named Morse, who disappeared 40 years ago after being falsely accused of devil worship. Descendants of the Morse family typically have black hair and eyes. Since they had no heirs, they didn't go through the process of reclaiming their noble status. Jay informs Raven that from now on, he will be known as the son of a Morse heir who eloped with an elf wife. Raven is surprised by this revelation and wonders if he is an elf, finding it somewhat peculiar. Suddenly, Raven senses a demonic energy emanating from the ship. He realizes that it is not caused by a single person and questions their sinister intentions. He ponders if they plan to do something terrible, perhaps using the place as a sacrificial site. At that moment, a man appears behind Raven and tries to harm him with a sharp tool from his pocket. However, Raven detects the attack and swiftly stops it by seizing the man's hand. He then proceeds to twist the man's arm, causing him to scream out in pain. The people aboard the ship are unaware of what's happening until they see blood coming from the man's arm. Concerned for the injured man, they approach Raven and ask him what he is doing. They plead with him to release the man and express their worry for the injured individual. The man, unable to hold onto his sharp tool, drops it, and Raven kicks the tool into the air. With another swift kick, Raven sends the tool flying towards the man, resulting in his demise. The man screams in pain and spits out blood as the demonic energy within him begins to dissipate. Onlookers start questioning if the substance coming out of the deceased man is smoke, which emits a foul smell and causes one person to vomit. Another person identifies the noxious smoke as the residue left by a devil worshipper. Grateful for Raven's intervention, someone thanks him for dealing with the secret devil worshipper but informs him that there is a specific protocol they should follow now. Raven grabs the person and asks if they mean something like this, tossing them aside. The person starts coughing and spitting out blood as Raven throws them into the air and counts to 3 before hurling them towards the others. Witnessing this, some people flee, realizing that Raven is a mass murderer. Another person finds it difficult to believe that all the people Raven harmed were actually devil worshippers. An elderly man descends from a higher level and approaches Raven, asking for an explanation of the chaotic situation. He can't comprehend how everything became so chaotic. The old man looks at Raven and apologizes for the confusion, revealing that they were all followers of the devil. He pleads with Raven to cooperate with them so they can sort out the situation. Raven realizes that the old man is the captain and commends him sarcastically for his acting skills. Using his large hammer, Raven strikes the captain, creating a hole in the ship's floor. The captain falls through the hole into the lower part of the ship. In Castle, the king receives a report stating that they had been monitoring the Flaxen port for the past 5 years. Among the guards, 5 were low-class demonic soldiers, and 2 navigators were expert class. The captain was a bladder-class demonic soldier. King Emerald van Karen pays close attention to the report, which reveals that the devil worshippers offered many living and dead bodies to the devil. The devils they worship are powerful demons capable of crossing between different worlds. The offerings serve as ceremonies to strengthen the devil worshippers and grant more power to the demons. Raven remarks that these devil worshippers are like parasites, living off others. The king explains that they became too complacent during the past 30 years due to the lack of sightings. He expresses gratitude to Raven, a beast tamer with elf blood, for helping save many people and reduce the number of victims. The king mentions hearing about Raven's ability to detect devil worshippers. The king then asks Raven to actually see his spirit. The person giving the report becomes scared and warns the king that it's unsafe, despite Raven being an elf. However, Raven offers to show the king the spirit if he wishes. Lunar the wolf appears, and the king praises the wolf, stating it is just as remarkable as he had hoped. After seeing the spirit himself, the king feels relieved. The king requests a private conversation with Raven, asking his people to leave temporarily. The king's entourage becomes apprehensive about the request, unable to understand why the king would want to speak alone with an outsider. The king assures them that it won't take long, and they leave the area. The king addresses Raven as a young hero and tells him not to worry about the others anymore. He then asks Raven if it's true that he is an elf, surprising Raven. The king reveals that he wants to know the real reason why Raven came there, claiming that it's a lie that Raven is an elf. An elderly man asks Raven about his true intentions. Confused and curious about the situation, Raven wonders where he went wrong. The old man, seated on his throne, explains that when one holds a position like his, they receive a lot of information. He mentions that elves typically don't have black hair. The old man assures Raven not to worry, as this is something only members of his royal family know. Raven apologizes for lying and explains that he has been pursuing followers of the devil. This revelation surprises the old man. Raven continues, revealing that he is trying to prevent them from stealing valuable items and causing trouble in Karun. The old man deduces that Raven must be from the Imperial nation. Raven inquires how the old man, known as the wise king of Karun, is aware of these political dynamics. The old man proceeds to explain that while Karun is technically a neutral country, it functions more like a confederacy of independent states. Given the strained relationship between the Empire and the Confederacy, it becomes challenging to trust an empire that is not on good terms with the Confederacy. The old man ponders if this is the reason why Raven kept his true identity hidden, despite his good intentions. As Raven reflects on the old man's wisdom, he realizes that the king of Karun has rightfully earned his reputation as the wise king. The old man expresses his trust in Raven due to his ability as a spirit tamer and his kind heart. This prompts Raven to contemplate whether a wise king can avoid making stereotypes. He acknowledges that spirit tamers, who work closely with mana-based spirits, naturally do not get along with the devil's followers. However, assuming that all spirit tamers are inherently good would be a stereotype. Raven recalls a less than nice beast tamer from his past life, which makes him feel a twinge of guilt. Feeling a sense of trust and conviction, Raven makes a request to the old man, the king of Karun. He asks to be assigned to the Order of Reliquary Guards and promises to solve the crisis in Karun. The king agrees, stating that he trusts Raven's abilities and character to apprehend the devil's followers. Symbolizing their commitment, a sword and badge are brought forward. The king, who prefers simplicity, forgoes the usual sword ritual and instead stands up, proclaiming Raven as a knight under his command. The king explains that Raven will join the Order of Reliquary Guards. With gratitude, Raven dons the badge, realizing that this is his first time becoming a knight in this life. In his thoughts, Raven informs his sister, Rena, that his journey has once again commenced. However, Raven remembers that there is one more matter he needs to discuss with the king. Curious, the king asks what it is. Raven reveals the existence of a man named Hustle, who is believed to be the mastermind behind all the troubles. He explains that Hustle is a name commonly used by beastmen and orcs. Raven inquires if the king has any knowledge about this individual. The king, taking a moment to contemplate, informs Raven that he is free to leave for now. The king admits that he needs more time to ponder their conversation. In the shadows, Hustle, clutching a shining crystal, expresses his satisfaction with its perfection, acknowledging the skill of the mage of sea waves. Suddenly, he notices something amiss and becomes frustrated. Hustle speaks in the darkness, mentioning a young child who can see through their plans. He realizes that things might not go as smoothly as he had hoped. Meanwhile, Raven finds himself in a group of fellow knights, engaged in a discussion about his deeds and whether he was the one responsible for defeating the devil's followers in Flaxen. Mason, a knight belonging to the Order of Reliquary Guards, speaks up and informs the others that they have been informed that Raven is a half-elf, urging them to treat him with respect. Mason advises the others not to underestimate Raven based on his youthful appearance and loudly proclaims that Raven is a remarkable individual who became a knight with relative ease. He emphasizes that Raven possesses the authority to command and oversee their actions. However, Mason's announcement leaves the other knights feeling displeased, and Raven notices their apparent lack of fondness towards him. Recalling his conversation with the king, where he expressed concern about being granted the position too easily, Raven inquires about the possibility of opposition within the palace. In response, the old man assures him that for centuries, the protection of Orthus has been carried out by Karun's army rather than relying solely on the divine artifact. The old man emphasizes that the divine artifact now holds symbolic value and that the role of its protector is merely a trivial task. Returning to reality, Raven contemplates that before him stands a group of individuals who have consistently failed and have little chance of advancing. He ponders that even if there is no opposition from external forces, the internal dynamics will likely be a fiercely competitive and contentious struggle. Curiosity piqued, Raven asks Mason if he is the famous Knight Mason. This question infuriates Mason, who chastises Raven for not understanding the hierarchical rules between seniors and juniors. Mason makes it clear that he is aware of the order within their ranks. Suddenly, Lunar the wolf makes a sudden appearance and lets out a resounding roar, startling everyone present. In response, Raven explains that he needed a devil's follower as an example for others and questions if any of the knights might be involved. Fearful, each knight vehemently denies any association with the devil's followers. Despite the initial tension, Raven expresses his eagerness to work alongside them, and the knights salute him. Nevertheless, Raven is troubled by the king's reaction when he mentions Hustle, wondering if the king possesses knowledge about this individual. Just as Raven contemplates this, someone approaches from behind and interrupts, stating that the discussion has gone on long enough. The individual addresses Raven as the newcomer who defeated the devil's followers and introduces himself as Truman, the Grand Master of the Reliquary Guards. Truman expresses his honor in meeting Raven, and Raven, in turn, expresses his own sense of gratitude. However, as Raven observes Truman's level of expertise, he begins to doubt if Truman is truly strong enough to hold the position of Grand Master. The Grand Master mentions that he heard Raven volunteered to join their Knight's Order. Truman then asks if Raven might have an interest in things like holy relics. This surprises Raven, and he asks what Truman plans to do if Raven answers yes. At this point, Raven wonders whether this older man could be connected to the disaster in Karun. Truman responds by saying he knew it. If Raven is being truthful, then he has come to the right place. However, Raven is still confused and doesn't fully understand. Truman explains that it's often said that relics are merely symbolic. He slams some books onto the table and continues, saying that many believe the barrier created by relic only keeps demons away within a 1-kilometer area. Moreover, it can't even stop the stronger demonic energy beyond a superhuman level. However, Truman explains that as he learns more, his thoughts change. He holds up a book and suggests that Raven read it to understand the significance of holy relics. Truman inquires if Raven is familiar with the promises made in ancient myths. He goes on to share that throughout history, humans have cherished divine relics. Raven begins to realize why he couldn't sense any demonic energy from Truman. He misunderstood the situation. Truman goes on to mention that all beings, even demons, are influenced by these relics, a force created by Avatar. He closes the book and mentions that some things are better understood through experience rather than just reading about them. Confused, Raven wonders what's happening. Truman invites Raven to follow him. They enter the central chambers of the castle. Here, Truman questions if Raven's name is truly Raven and then asks if Raven knows why being a reliquary guard is seen as unimportant. Raven suggests that it's because holy relics are merely symbolic. Truman opens a door and admits that the reason is even simpler. Both of them step inside, and in that place, there's a really large and bright holy relic called humanitas. Truman explains that they don't need to protect it simply because it doesn't require protection. When Raven looks at the relic, he realizes how massive and beautiful it is. Truman mentions that it floats in the air for reasons unknown. He adds that, according to legend, only those who are qualified can touch it. That's why they don't need to guard it. Truman then challenges Raven to see if he is qualified to touch it. Raven goes ahead and touches the relic. Truman can't believe what he's seeing. Raven notices that it's a 7th grade divine artifact, a ball of light that doesn't affect anything in this world but has the power to reject things from another world. Raven hears a voice and wonders if it's coming from the barrier. He's surprised that he's the only one who can hear it. Raven thinks it might be because he's sensitive to mana. He realizes that this halo, the barrier itself, is a holy relic. He wonders if it's possible to move it. Truman places his hand on Raven's shoulder and asks if Raven just had a conversation with the holy relic. As they leave, Truman tells Raven that he definitely has a surprising talent that can amaze people. Truman explains that he's been part of the reliquary guards for many decades, and something like this has never occurred before. Raven believes that even though Truman might not be very strong, he takes pride in his job. To Raven, Truman appears distinct from the rest of the Order. While they are walking, they spot Greg's symbol, a member of the Imperial Knights Order. Truman questions why Greg is present there. Greg responds by saying that it has nothing to do with Truman. Then Greg turns his attention to Raven and asks if he is the half-elf. Greg has heard about Raven. Raven corrects him, mentioning that he's actually just a quarter elf, although he knows that even this isn't true. Greg is surprised and asks about Raven being an elf, the hero who defeated the Black Magician. Greg accuses Raven of trying to deceive them and attacks with his sword, saying he'll reveal Raven's true identity right then and there. Unfazed, Raven remarks that it's not surprising to see a clown stepping up to challenge him. Quick on his feet, Raven avoids the attack, takes hold of Greg's arm, and throws him down onto the ground. Greg falls in pain and accuses Raven of cheating. In response, Raven points out that Greg is still talking, implying that his move wasn't enough. Raven seizes Greg's arm again and slams him to the ground once more. This makes Greg say sorry for his behavior. Truman, who is witnessing this, is quite surprised by the turn of events. Amidst this, Raven realizes that he shouldn't forget his manners in situations like this, so he expresses gratitude to Greg for the practice and mentions that he learned a lot from their fight. Truman is left wondering about what he just witnessed. Meanwhile, a man observing the fight from a distance finds Raven to be an interesting fellow. A man named Robert Dumbbell, a member of the Imperial Knights group, challenges Raven. He asks if the rumors about Raven defeating Greg are true. Robert wants to test Raven's skills, but before he can finish talking, Raven slaps him across the face. Another knight introduces himself as Tannen Royer from the same knight's order. Then, another knight named Edger Albert announces himself as well. Raven responds by punching both of them. Another knight steps forward, introducing himself as Randolph Granches, the commander of the Imperial Knights Order. He draws his sword and proposes a duel with Raven. Raven takes out his hammer and strikes Randolph's sword with it, sending Randolph flying into the air and falling to the ground. Raven comments that Randolph is more useful than the others, at least a bit. He also mentions that Randolph did him a favor by accepting the duel, so now it's time for Randolph to return the favor. Raven then asks Randolph if he knows someone named Hustle. Randolph responds that he doesn't think he knows anyone by that name. Raven is confused, wondering why nobody seems to know anyone named Hustle. Suddenly, someone comes forward, chuckling, and comments on the idea of Raven taking on Randolph all by himself. Curious, Raven asks this person who he is, observing the newcomer to determine if he's at a very high level of skill or just a beginner. The man apologizes and introduces himself as Liam von Peterson, the Grand Master of the Imperial Knights. Raven immediately apologizes for being impolite. Liam, however, urges Raven not to be overly formal. He explains that as an old man, he's delighted to see such a talented young individual like Raven. Then, surprisingly, Liam asks if Raven would be up for a duel with him as well. This request astonishes Raven. Liam clarifies that he's seeking some entertainment to alleviate his boredom, and in return, he's willing to provide a bit of information about hustle. He asks if this offer is fair compensation. With determination, Raven grabs his hammer and figures that a challenger-class mana martial artist has come to challenge him to a duel, and the prize for this duel is the information Raven is seeking. Liam mentions that he'll go a bit easy on Raven, but he still expects Raven to give his best effort. Raven grins and realizes that he'd be foolish to turn down this opportunity. Without hesitation, Raven leaps into action, attacking Liam with his hammer, all the while expressing his gratitude for the duel. Liam tries to stop Raven's attack. Raven warns Liam that underestimating him could lead to injury. He notices that Liam seems lighter. Swiftly, Raven kicks Liam's leg and realizes it's as solid as a rock. Liam comments on Raven's skill. Raven moves backward and notices that Liam is using a beginner-level defense technique. It's like a strong and heavy knight in shining armor. Liam changes his mind about going easy and attacks Raven with his sword. Raven blocks the attack with his hammer. Liam finds the situation entertaining, and Raven agrees. In a powerful strike, Liam understands there's nothing he can teach Raven about his skill. He recognizes that Raven only lacks experience and accomplishments. Meanwhile, Raven observes how Liam shifts his weight to build momentum and focuses his strength on his strikes. Raven decides he could learn a thing or two from this. Raven keeps launching attacks at Liam repeatedly. Liam comments that even the title of genius isn't enough to describe Raven. He calls Raven a monster. Raven playfully accepts the compliment and delivers a forceful blow to Liam's sword. Liam decides that Raven has proven his point. Unfortunately, Raven loses his balance, and Liam seizes the opportunity to strike Raven's sword. Raven manages to block the attack with his hammer but is sent flying through the air due to the impact. Realizing that things have gone too far, Liam suggests they stop. Raven, though barely standing, manages to express his gratitude towards Liam and acknowledges that this experience is new for him at his age. He tells Liam that he's the one who should be thankful. As a gesture of appreciation, Liam fulfills his promise and offers Raven the information he was seeking. Finally, Raven heads to meet Hustle and wonders if the person in front of him is indeed Hustle. Liam mentions that this is something new and different for him at his age. He feels like he should be the one thanking Raven instead. In response, Raven says that the experience was beneficial training for him. Raven comes to understand that there was indeed talent in Karun, contrary to what he thought. Liam says he's ready to give Raven the information he promised. He introduces a man named Lidman, who is part of the Imperial Knights Order. However, Lidman only follows orders from the king. Hearing this, Raven wonders if it's Lidman and not Hustle. Liam explains that Lidman's responsibilities are related to the duties Liam knows about, but it appears that Lidman has traveled to various places, so there's a possibility he might know about a person named Hustle. Liam suggests that he could arrange a meeting for Raven with Lidman. Suddenly, someone urgently calls out to Raven, informing him from behind that the king is seeking his immediate presence. This news surprises Raven as he meets the king, who informs him that the man he was searching for has been found. The king directs Raven to greet this person, revealing him to be Mr. Lidman, an expert on routes across the eastern continent. Upon hearing this, Raven feels surprised, wondering when he had actually requested they search for Hustle. Recalling Liam's mention of a man named Lidman earlier, Raven ponders if this is the same individual. As Lidman greets him and acknowledges Raven's heroic feat of defeating demon followers, Raven confirms that he was indeed searching for him, expressing honor in meeting him. However, Raven's gaze towards the king reflects a hint of annoyance, wishing he had been informed if the king had planned something. Lidman, addressing Raven by name, snaps him out of his thoughts. Explaining that he surmised Lidman's origins from his appearance, Raven mentions his desire to visit the eastern continent someday when the king inquires about his desires. Lidman responds, adding that the king has a reputation for generosity, rewarding those who discover new routes. Despite Lidman's arrival, the king reminds Raven of his promise to uproot the demon followers before departing. Although Raven agrees and assures the king of keeping his word, he begins to wonder about the sudden mention of the demon followers, casting a suspicious glance at Lidman. However, he relaxes upon observing Lidman's demeanor, considering that if he were a demon follower, Raven's lunar wolf wouldn't have remained calm. Yet, Raven is surprised to detect a magical energy around Lidman reminiscent of what Jay had described about the name Hustle. As Raven starts to piece together his suspicions about Lidman possibly being Hustle, Lidman unexpectedly praises him for his dependable nature. The king reveals Lidman's role in assisting with eliminating the demon followers, surprising Lidman himself, who expected to commence the search for Sir Gale the next day. While saddened by the postponement of his mission, Lidman agrees to prioritize the immediate threat at the king's behest. Despite detecting no demonic energy around Lidman, Raven remains convinced of his true identity as Hustle. When the king seeks Raven's opinion on the matter, Raven confirms that Lidman is not a demon follower. Acknowledging this, the king orders Raven to stay by his side for personal verification, explaining that he had no other choice due to a gesture toward his heart, hinting at a magical oath. When Raven inquires if it's because of an oath of mana, the king confirms it. The mana oath is akin to a promise made with magical energy. Breaking it results in a shock, the strength of which depends on one's magic level. A 3-level oath causes a small shock but can be harmful if someone is already weak. Curious, Raven asks the king why he's going to such lengths. He points out that while Sir Lidman has been loyal for decades, this is only the second time the king is meeting him. The king explains that those from the bloodline of Karun, like him, gain an unusual foresight as they age. Raven wants more information, so the king explains about a recurring dream where holy relics go missing, and demons destroy the capital city. While the king kept having the same dream repeatedly, Raven arrived and predicted the disappearance of the holy relic. This revelation shocks Raven. The king hopes it's merely the imagination of an old person, but he worries that it might come true, wondering if it will end with the disappointment of a loyal subject. Suddenly, there's a loud noise. When Raven looks back, he notices Hustle, surprising him as he thought Hustle had left the inner palace. Raven, riding on his lunar wolf, notices that even the lunar wolf couldn't sense any evil energy. Raven starts wondering if the real Hustle might be somewhere else, but why would he choose to run away during a time like this? The answer seems quite clear, and Raven knows he just needs to find some evidence. As night falls, people are loading goods onto a ship. One person questions 2 others who are moving a crate towards the ship, asking if they could be a bit quieter, as they are working at night for a reason. At this moment, a figure wearing a hooded gown approaches. Everyone becomes alert and asks who this person is. When the hood is removed, they realize it's Hustle. They ask him why he's here earlier than expected, as they were anticipating his arrival tomorrow. Hustle responds, explaining that something has occurred. He reveals that the king has sent a young boy after him. This revelation shocks all the men. A man tells Hustle that the young boy hasn't been around for a while. Hustle responds, saying nobody really knows what's going on in the boy's head. He then raises his voice, telling everyone to be quiet and get ready to leave. All the men quickly start doing their tasks. Suddenly, there's a huge explosion on the ship, surprising everyone. In the midst of the chaos, Raven emerges and questions them about their secretive actions at night, calling them worshippers of demons. The men shout that it's an ambush, and someone is on top of the boat. Without hesitation, Raven leaps off the ship and attacks, knocking down 4 people with a single swing of his hammer. He challenges anyone who wants to face the consequences to step forward. The men become angry and call Raven a monster. Hustle criticizes Raven, calling him pathetic, and notes that although Raven may follow Avatar, he's just an expert class. Hustle suggests that Raven might be tired from all this movement and warns his men not to fall for Raven's plan to regain his energy. Raven grins and playfully asks if he's been caught. Hustle responds by calling Raven a foolish youngster and expresses his surprise that Raven would come alone. Hustle declares that he will deal with Raven now. Unfazed, Raven raises his hammer confidently and challenges Hustle to give it his best shot. Raven manages to push away Hustle's sword. Undeterred, Hustle brings out another sword. However, Raven uses his mana hand to block the attack and calls for Lunar. Lunar arrives, visibly enraged, and launches an attack on Hustle. Hustle becomes furious at Lunar for leaving a scar on his body. He threatens to rip apart Lunar right in front of Raven. Hustle charges at Lunar with the intention to attack. Filled with worry, Raven shouts a desperate, "No," in defense of Lunar. Despite Raven's plea, Hustle strikes Lunar with both of his swords, threatening not only Lunar but also Raven. Lunar responds with a growl and begins to move towards Raven. This confuses Hustle, who expected a more substantial impact from his attack. He wonders what just happened, as he anticipated a significant outcome from his strike. Hustle wonders how Lunar managed to survive being summoned back to save energy. Raven only healed the hurt part of Lunar. Hustle is amazed by this remarkable skill. He decides that he must eliminate Raven tonight. Hustle's companions attack Raven, but he sends them all flying with a single powerful swing of his hammer. They call out to Hustle for help. Raven jumps onto Lunar and encourages him to keep going. He refers to Hustle as a crazy beast man. Raven informs Lunar that their mana is running low and instructs Lunar to focus on moving. Hustle comments that it seems like Raven learned about him from the king, but he feels that the old man doesn't know how to be grateful. Raven remembers the time when he found out that Hustle had left the castle. The king had mentioned that Hustle has a lot of tales behind him. Usually, werebeasts inherit abilities from land animals, but sometimes unusual individuals are born among them. However, the werebeasts tend to get rid of these individuals because they remind them of ancient mermaids who went against their avatar. When Raven inquired from the king why he suddenly shared all this information with him, the king recounted a time when he had encountered a unique person, someone different from others. This person had saved his life and was concealing his real identity to survive outside his own town. Since the king needed this person's special abilities, he made a solemn promise over the mana to keep this person's true identity a secret. Meanwhile, Hustle, positioned by the ocean's shore, asks Raven if the king had mentioned anything else about Hustle. Hustle raises both of his swords, and the movement stirs the waves around him. Raven recalls when the king began to cough up blood and told Raven that if this man becomes his adversary, it would be extremely dangerous. In the presence of Hustle, Raven realizes that he cannot even fathom engaging in a fight above the ocean because Hustle is the killer whale. Hustle uses his power to create playful movements with the ocean waves. At this moment, Raven realizes that Hustle is like a killer whale. With a quick motion, Hustle directs the waves toward Raven. Raven, riding on his lunar wolf, tries to skillfully avoid the incoming waves, which isn't easy. Hustle angrily tells Raven to meet his end. Hustle then transforms another wave into a massive water sphere and sends it crashing towards Raven and his lunar wolf. Raven notices that Hustle's weapon has become stronger in the water. The water sphere explodes upon impact. Hustle smugly believes that it is over, but Raven unexpectedly emerges from within it while riding his lunar wolf. Raven launches an attack on Hustle, stating that Hustle should be the one dying. Hustle defends himself with his two swords. Hustle realizes that Raven's ability to recover quickly is unusual. He finds the fight bothersome and thinks that backup will arrive soon, so Hustle decides he shouldn't prolong the battle any further. He starts to say what he'll do next, but before he can finish, Raven surprises him by launching an attack. Hustle quickly flees into the ocean to escape. Hustle emerges from the ocean like a whale surrounded by swirling waves. He questions if Raven is just an ordinary person. The whale declares that he will postpone Raven's demise for a short while and moves away into the ocean. Raven becomes frustrated because he can't follow Hustle into the water. Then, to Raven's astonishment, Lunar starts walking in midair. This surprises Raven, and he asks Lunar about the ability he just displayed. He wonders if Lunar can use that ability right now with his help. However, Raven quickly apologizes, admitting that he doesn't know what to do, so they should try it another time. Lunar looks disappointed. Raven recalls what Hustle said about delaying Raven's death and wonders why Hustle would want to do that. Then, Litman enters a cave and expresses satisfaction with everything being as expected. Someone inside the cave notices Litman and recognizes him as the mage of the tidal wave. The man yells at Litman to be quiet. Litman tells the old man that he's being unkind to the person who helped him. He mentions that despite appearances, he still cares about him. Litman takes out some bread from the bag he's holding and says if the old man doesn't eat and passes out, what will happen when the monster comes. A monster arrives at the cave's entrance, scaring the old man. The monster looks inside the cave. Litman asks if it's impressive, explaining that it's a special treasure their group found. If they let it go, the treasure will send a message to its mother telepathically. If they harm it, its mother will know right away. This could lead to the destruction of Paran, their hometown. Littman suggests that if the old man wants to save the town, he should put in more effort. The old man warns Littman that he'll face divine punishment. Littman kicks the bag of bread and says he's had that stuff since he was born, and this is just the right payback. After that, Littman goes away. The old man uses his magic to harm the monster. He sort of tells Littman that he's granting his wishes. Later, Raven comes to the king along with Lion. Lion tells the king that they have confirmed that the dockworkers were actually followers of demons. The king asks about the cargo they were handling. Lion explains that the cargo consists of items used for magical ceremonies, and if they add up their value, it's like half of what the whole country makes in a year. The king wonders if they should have been suspicious of Littman earlier. Liam explains that Littman aimed to show how special individuals like mutants could contribute to the world. Littman had big dreams and proved his abilities, but the question remains why Raven says sorry to the king and explains that he learned from Sir Lion that hardly anyone knows much about Littman or what he does. The king says that's what Littman wanted. The king believed Littman was trying to avoid being targeted by the Werbeast assassins. Raven informs the king that there should have been some suspicions, as someone with grand plans wouldn't keep everything hidden. Lion becomes concerned about Raven's straightforwardness. The king reassures Liam that it's alright and agrees with Raven, acknowledging that they should have realized this sooner. The king emphasizes that dwelling on the past won't alter anything. He then asks Raven to share the details and affectionately refers to him as a brave individual. Due to the loss of Hustle, the king inquires if Raven has a plan to locate the demon worshippers. Raven confidently assures the king that he does and asks if the king could provide some assistance. Subsequently, Raven goes to the pub to meet Jay. Jay opens the door and apologizes, stating that they are not yet open. Raven greets Jay and inquires about his well-being. Jay realizes it's Raven and asks about something behind him. Raven proceeds to inform Jay about the recent events. Jay comprehends that there is a worshipper of demons who even Raven couldn't easily identify. Jay understands why the situation is complicated. Raven explains that there was no involvement of demonic energy. Jay expresses surprise at this revelation. Raven clarifies that Hustle, the person, is actually collaborating with the demon worshippers. Jay understands that there are individuals who make such detrimental choices. Jay is shocked by how quickly Raven sought him out. Jay discloses that he always wanted to demonstrate the potential of the Black Wings to Raven. Raven asks Jay if there is still a chance for them. Jay ponders the notion, and both of them gaze at some boxes of goods. Raven takes one box, opens it, and discovers a letter inside. Raven shows the letter to Jay and explains that the king wants Jay to gather their remaining artifacts. Raven tosses the letter in the air and asks if Jay, being the Black Wing, knows of a magic expert who can track, even if it's just one person. Now is the moment for the Black Wings to exhibit their skills. Raven instructs Jay to find a tracking magic expert and examine all the artifacts to dispose of them. While grabbing items from the box and tossing them into the air, Raven asks Jay where the tracking magician is. Raven insists that Jay should bring them there. Jay sadly informs Raven that it will be challenging. This surprises Raven, and he asks why. Jay explains that they have attempted before, but the individuals they are dealing with are extremely cautious. They have eliminated all the evidence. Raven asks what that means. Raven starts to feel trapped, as if all the difficult things he has done were in vain. Jay clarifies that it's not entirely true. The items Raven obtained from the demon worshippers and brought to Jay are plentiful. They wouldn't gather such a large quantity unless they had a specific purpose. In fact, having such a substantial amount could indicate that they are preparing for a special event. Raven is confused and fails to grasp the significance. Jay continues, stating that if they are planning a final ceremony to burn Karun, they would be very careful about the magical items they use. However, the required ingredients are different. Creating one magical item necessitates at least 3 ingredients, sometimes even up to 10. They would attempt to collect ingredients that won't raise suspicion. And gathering all those ingredients would take a considerable amount of time. But Jay presents a thought. What if there is a store in Karun that sells all these ingredients? They would undoubtedly visit that store to save time. This idea astonishes Raven. Raven finds it impressive that Jay wasn't solely focused on business. Suddenly, someone arrives holding a dish. Raven asks about it. Jay tells Raven that he's right on time and wanted him to taste it. Jay lifts the cover and introduces their famous dish, Anxon King Galbi chicken. Raven expresses gratitude but mentions that he needs to remain focused at the moment. Jay insists, urging Raven to take just one bite. Raven complies, saying okay, just one bite. He takes a bite and is truly amazed. Eventually, he finishes the entire dish and even drinks the remaining soup, wondering why it's so delicious. Jay inquires how Raven liked it. Raven asks Jay why he doesn't make this his main occupation. Jay chuckles and explains that he doesn't feel proud enough of it. He adds that he believes he can move on to a new mission without any regrets. Jay suggests to Raven that they should begin hunting those demon worshippers. There must be an opportunity. 2 months later, on a dark street during the night, two figures stand there. One of them asks the other if this place is safe. The other person reassures him, saying not to worry, as he has already investigated the store owner's background. The owner has been in business for a while, likely solely motivated by money. The first man questions if his companion is defying the elder's instructions. The companion responds that the investigation has already been conducted. They enter the store, emphasizing the need to utilize their time wisely in such situations. Jay, assuming the role of the shop owner, greets the men and inquires if they have any specific items in mind. The first man presents a list and mentions hearing that the shop owner trades in various goods. He instructs Jay to gather everything mentioned on the list. Jay takes the list, checks it, and smirks before agreeing to assist the men. Jay then informs Raven that their 2 months of hard work are finally paying off. Jay informs the men that he will prepare the items right away and asks them to wait momentarily as he walks away. One of the men questions his companion if this course of action is acceptable, as they were warned by the first elder to be cautious. Jay overhears their conversation. The other man responds, explaining that this approach would save them a significant amount of time. He expresses confidence in the first elder's decision. Suddenly, someone arrives, causing both men to become frightened. The newcomer expresses interest in their story and asks if they would like to hear his version. The men recognize this person as an elder and become scared. They question how he arrived there. Jay deduces that they appear to be a group and wonders if they are having a discussion. The elder informs the men that he cannot continue watching them fail at important tasks like this. The men become frightened. The elder points at one of them and reassures the elder not to worry about the shop owner's identity, as he has already verified it. However, the elder employs his dark power to destroy that man. The man pleads for forgiveness from the elder, but he is burned and remains seated on the ground, apologizing. The elder orders the other man to clean up the mess and restore the base. Then the elder approaches Jay and apologizes for his actions, mentioning that he finds the timing too coincidental and feels somewhat suspicious. The elder points at Jay and uses his dark power on him, causing Jay to yell out. The next thing Jay remembers is Raven, trying to wake him up. Jay, in a sorrowful state, lies on the ground and opens his eyes. Raven asks Jay what happened. Jay explains that he was fortunate. Raven questions how that can be considered lucky. Jay recalls that the elder realized Jay is unable to use mana at all, leading the elder to believe he should not have used his power on Jay. The elder informed Jay that he deals with valuable items. To wake Jay up, the elder employed his dark power. The elder tossed a bag of coins at Jay and stated that he would pay Jay well, but Jay must assist him a few more times. The elder warned Jay that if he dared to speak about what occurred that day, his safety would be compromised. Jay expresses relief to Raven that he does not possess the power of mana, which turned out to be fortunate. Raven asks if the elder simply left after that. Jay explains that it is not that simple because the elder can capture and harm Jay at any time, just as he recently experienced. Raven suggests that the elder openly disregarded Jay because he lacks the power of mana, and he mentions that the elder even left a clue behind. Raven picks up an object from the ground and proposes that Jay should contact a skilled tracking magician. Jay states that he wants to check one thing before taking that step. Raven asks what Jay means by that. Jay explains that this situation may be far more dangerous than Raven realizes. Jay sensed a powerful presence, similar to when he was trained by the individual, emanating from the Black Warlock. Jay speculates that the Black Warlock may be on the same level as a Seventh Circle magician. Raven insists that regardless of the risk, they must proceed and assures Jay that he will find a way to make it work if their initial plan fails. Jay expresses his expectation, acknowledging that he now understands why the king holds Raven in high regard. Jay tells Raven that he trusts him and decides to move forward. After 1 month, Raven holds a paper and realizes that he has successfully tracked the movements of the demon worshippers. Raven concludes that in a few days, on a nearby island, a significant magical ceremony will take place. Raven decides to go to this location with the Black Wing group. He has already shared the information with the royal family, so they can expect assistance soon. The king has also dispatched additional individuals for support. Meanwhile, the Grand Master arrives and informs Raven that many of their knights are on vacation. Sir Lion has also unexpectedly taken a break. Raven asks the Grand Master if he has a good relationship with Sir Liam. The Grand Master explains that he and Liam are old friends who often spend time together. He then extends an invitation to Raven to join them for dinner. Raven politely declines the invitation, apologizing for doing so. The Grand Master asks Raven not to reveal that he plans to take a vacation as well. Raven politely explains that taking a vacation is precisely what he intends to do. The Grand Master sighs and realizes he cannot change Raven's mind. He suggests that Raven rest well during his vacation, to which Raven expresses gratitude. A few days later, on the scheduled day of their mission, the knights gather at the relic storage room. However, several key members of their group are missing, and their absence is notable considering the importance of this moment. Tonight, their plan is to retrieve the relic. Raven, hidden behind a pillar, reflects on the smart decision to take time off but notes that their suspicious behavior is quite noticeable. Unexpectedly, Grand Master Truman appears, surprising Raven. Raven questions Truman about his presence. The knights interrupt, defending Truman's reputation, stating that he has trained many royal knights and reorganized the knights group. They question the fairness of confining him to guarding the relic. Raven then inquires if Truman was a former member of the knights group. Truman confirms that it was a long time ago and explains that he recognized his limitations when compared to a remarkably talented peer. Truman focused on earning recognition through training and service, but in return, he received the title of a landless barony and a mere notice of transfer. He expresses frustration at the king's lack of action during that time. Truman mentions that Mr. Littman was the only one who supported him, as Littman also faced unfair treatment due to his background. Littman showed Truman a new vision, a world that valued wisdom over personal strength, and they dreamed of creating a new kingdom. Raven questions Truman's collusion with a demon worshipper if he intends to create a new kingdom. Truman explains that it is too late for him to turn back now. He commands his knights to capture Raven, and they all attack with their swords. However, Raven confidently grabs his hammer and remarks that this turn of events is actually good. With a powerful blow from his hammer, Raven sends all the knights flying into the air. Truman is deeply surprised by this. Raven acknowledges that this outcome is better. Truman looks at his knights, who are in a dire situation, calling out to him for help. He wonders how this could happen. Truman tells Raven, "All right, let's end it like this," and throws a glass globe toward Raven. Raven strikes the globe with his hammer, shattering it on the ground and releasing a dark power. A demon emerges and lets out a loud scream. Truman is shocked, questioning how something like that can come out of a divine object. The enormous demon grabs Truman with one hand, lifting him towards its mouth as if to devour him. Raven jumps and attempts to attack the demon with his hammer, but the demon evades the blow, causing Truman to fall to the ground. Raven also lands on the ground. Confused, Truman asks why Raven did that. Raven asks Truman where he obtained the glass globe. Truman explains that Mr. Littman gave it to him and instructed him to use it in emergencies. The demon spreads its wings, and Raven realizes it is merging with the holy barrier. Truman questions if this is true. Raven believes they must have been aware of this. He tells Truman that there is much to uncover, and advises him to wait patiently. The demon screeches in the air and heads towards the relics. Raven declares that he won't allow it to take the relics and attacks the demon with his hammer. The demon screams in pain and falls to the ground. Opening its mouth, the demon starts floating upwards. Raven watches this with disappointment. By the bright daylight, near the ocean's edge, a ritual to kill knights is taking place. The person responsible for killing all the knights informs Littman that similar rituals are happening on other islands as well. The man asks Littman if he can determine the nature of the ritual. Littman sits down and explains that it's a grand illusion using magic to conceal something. The man expresses confusion and asks Littman to clarify. Littman reaches into his coat, retrieves something, and admits that he doesn't know all the details, but they need to resume their work quickly. Holding a bag, Lidman sprinkles its contents onto the magic circle of the ritual. Lidman remarks that if they are employing magic to hide things, their actual plan must involve Karun. The man is surprised and asks about Karun, realizing that Raven is in danger.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.